1, 2, 3, 4. One-legged Roger and his one-legged mother lived in a house in downtown Atlanta.
I mean, because good God, think about the last 5 years in theater and the conversations that have finally taken hold about what stories we're telling, whose stories we're telling, what storytellers will have the opportunity to get into the room. And this beautiful expansion of the artists that are finally, they've always had a voice, but we've finally mic'd them up and let them have access to mass audiences in a way that they have struggled mightily to find up until this point. And now we all have to take an intermission. And I think when we come back, we can really have strengthened our resolve in that regard to look at marginalized voices and find a way to amplify them, so that when theater comes back, theater is better. Hello, David.
Great to see you.
It's good to see you.
Thank you for doing this.
No, I'm happy to do it. So how have you been keeping your hands busy? The reality that none of this is short term. And I feel like I can't live every day leading with the fact that there's some sort of deficit there. That's not it's not a useful or productive way to approach your day. It's not good for your mental health to kind of operate in this consistent awareness of what is not there.
Mhm.
And so I made a deal with myself at the end of April that come 1st of May, we're going to stop treating this like it's temporary. We're going to stop treating it like it's short term, and figure out what you're doing personally and what you're doing creatively, in what's going to be a long-term reality. And then when additional things come back into my life, then it can just be a lovely surprise. Um, and so that was the deal I cut with myself, and as a result, May has been a hell of a lot more um creatively productive, and also just like personally finding a sense of peace and purpose. And so I've been really grateful for that. Talk to me in September and we'll see how I'm doing. But right now I feel solid.
Every word you said was like fresh air because I am definitely one of those that needs uh, something like this to keep grounded and to breathe into that space of uncertainty,
Yeah.
which I probably just in denial. It was pretty easy to not take a rubric on yesterday's expectations, to
Yeah.
realize this is all new.
Mm-hmm.
And the conversation just a couple weeks ago was, I don't know if we can move the art form forward. Let's just try to engage. And the conversation now is, what kind of stories can we tell? How important it is that we connect. How can you connect through this?
Yeah. But that's, I mean, routines and the systems that we put in place are a comfort because they give us the illusion of control.
Mhm.
And having the rug yanked globally um, offers us the opportunity to reflect upon the how we were kind of fooling ourselves in the first place. the routines and systems that we put in place. There's a reason everybody keeps forgetting what day of the week it is. We structure our lives to give the illusion of control. Um, but each one of us individually has those moments where a relationship ends, or a job ends, or there's a death in your family of origin or family of choice, and the complete shakeup that reminds you, oh, right, the routine is just a thing that I do to make myself believe that I'm in control of how the day goes. But when something significant happens, that all flies out the window. The gift and the potential that we have for exploration right now is that we all got the rug yanked simultaneously.
Yeah.
And what we do next, particularly in an art form that by its nature will be one of the last things to come back in a way that we recognize, in a way that feels familiar. I think our time is better spent looking at the possibility of how different it can be by the time we have the opportunity to invite a room to gather again. And maybe we needed a break to pull that off.
Maybe to be in a pause collectively.
Yeah.
And personally, I feel like I've definitely been in a race since I was a teenager of going to school and then
Same.
school and then booking the job and then moving here and then finishing this.
Being in repose is not one of my strong suits. And I'm curious to find, and have made a lot of discoveries in the last 2 months, of what life is like with a little bit of stillness. And I think it's something that I'm gonna hold on to when we're on the other side of it. And there will be another side of it. There will be a return to inviting audiences in for the telling of stories. That will absolutely happen. That may be 2 years away. And that's why I can't focus on the deficit, because if I knew like that the only thing that's going to bring me peace and happiness is telling stories in front of an audience, which is something I would have said 2 months ago, that without that in my life, I don't know who I am. Without the process of storytelling and the process of gathering an audience, which we have done since time memoriam. And so it felt like a pretty solid guarantee that we would always have that. And I could not begin to separate my own identity from that passion and that calling. And then unexpectedly, it was taken away. And yet I still exist, and I'm still me. And I still find things to be joyful and passionate about every single day. And so I'm grateful that I had this time for learning.
That's amazing.
I was waiting to see where you were going with that.
I got bankers, police, lawyers, exes chasing after me. Oh, they're never gonna get me now. And they say the world might end, and if it doesn't, I'll be free. Oh, they're never gonna get me now.
I'm hearing,
'Cause I got you, and you are life.
The exact same way that you and I are having a conversation right now. And from what I've seen in the last few months, the web platform seems to be very useful for letting interpretive artists keep those muscles in shape, um, and doing interpretive work, whether that's readings or monologues or, two-handers, whatever they're doing. And it's important that we keep our storytellers practiced. Um, and so I think it works very well in that regard. As entertainment, it's variable. Um, and um, I think podcasts could be a really great avenue. I think um, audio storytelling allows for a uh, a greater degree of polish on the final product. Um, Once you start getting into video capture, you're competing with movies. You're competing with Netflix, and I don't know necessarily that that's going to be our strong suit as theater performers competing with film.
Like a shit show Zoom play, I think would be entertaining.
Yeah.
Because just Death of a Salesman through Zoom is not cutting it.
Yeah, exactly. I think as long as the content is acknowledging the reality of the presentation,
Yeah.
then it can work to your advantage. I think what Alabama Shakespeare Festival did with the 22 Homes project with the monologues, and part of the directive on that was to acknowledge the reality of the camera. And
So I'll have to look that out, and I'm getting better at going. You can look at that right here.
Oh, good. Yeah. Alabama Shakespeare Festival, 22 Homes Project. So many wonderful Atlanta and Atlanta adjacent playwrights and performers were involved in that. Lauren Gunderson did it. Adai Moon. I did one.
Nice.
Daryl Lisa Fazio. Good people. Good people. Pearl Klieg. Um, and I liked what they did with it. And also, and I think this is key, all of them ran about 4 to 7 minutes max, um, which I think acknowledges an audience's attention span for a direct to camera, direct address, direct to camera monologue.
Yeah, it's tough. I participated in the Chicago 24-hour monologue festival,
Mm,
and my monologue was about 10 minutes, and I knew that it was a stretch,
kind of pushing, yeah.
but a lot of some of my friends did some really incredible work with their with these kids today with their Snapchats and throwing the glasses on and throwing the scarf in the screen and coming back and some really incredible TikTok imaginative work with the monologue, and I thought that was great. I just made believe with words in front of my Zoom.
Well, I mean, if you look at even the 3 episodes of SNL at Home
Mm-hmm.
that they did, and you're watching the writers and performers learning episode to episode, and the level of
How to do
sophistication
this? Yeah.
in presentation from week to week to week, I feel like is kind of this microcosm of exactly what we as performing arts in general are figuring out with this new platform. Um, I was offered the opportunity to audition for a show that is scheduled to go up in the fall. I was prepping my audition monologue, and I also had a show that had been announced at Dad's Garage, um, my play, Entertaining Lesbians, that was supposed to go up in July. Then we moved it to September.
Mm-hmm.
And then we had to acknowledge this show is not happening in September. And we moved it to sometime in 2021 when we have a better understanding of how the world's going to work. And we made that decision. And then I go back and I look at the monologue that I'm prepping for this audition for a show that would be rehearsing in roughly the same time frame. And I, as for me and my house, recognized I will not be ready to get back to work in front of an audience in the fall. Um, the we don't have enough concrete information for me to feel as a 3-time cancer survivor who would very much like to see his parents at some point. Um, I have priorities that are way above and beyond me stepping on a stage anytime soon. And the fear that I carry with me every day, and I know I said, it's important not to live in fear and not to live in the deficit, but I don't know when I'm going to get to see my parents again. And my parents, by necessity, they live in a cluster with my mother's 2 sisters, or 2 of her sisters, living on either side of them. And my mother is the baby. And so the 3 couples in that bubble range between 65 and 84 years old. And none of the kids can break that bubble. And that bubble is so secure and so safe, and they have only interacted with each other for the past 2 months, and we're sending groceries and I've I order things on Amazon and send them to her. But my top priority in life is keeping that bubble safe, because I can't be present for them, because being present for them would put them at greater risk. And so we're preserving that. And so when people have conversations about when can we go to a restaurant again, or when can we open a theater again, I'm like, I am not at a point where I can see my mama. I don't give a shit about your theater.
Yeah.
And that's my personal priorities. And I recognize there are jobs on the line, there are institutions on the line, there are leases that are running out, and people that can't pay their rent, and all of those are absolutely priorities for the people who are in the position to make those decisions. That's just not where my head's at. I just miss my mama. As we incrementally approach a fairly uncertain future, um, the only thing that I can be certain of is that things will be different, and that's okay.
That is okay. I went to a meeting yesterday. It was the first time a meeting was able to be open together with social distancing, and people didn't hold hands at the end.
Right.
But it was amazing just for my recovery to be in a room with other recovering addicts, experiencing recovery together. And there was a newcomer, so the shares were all about our first meeting experience. And I left it, and I thought, back to basics. The only thing I need to do is stay sober.
Yeah.
That's the only thing I need to do. Everything else is just gravy.
Yeah.
And that's a thought I haven't had in here in a long time, because I've just been sober.
Right. And no, I mean, the
necessity of it became very huge.
Yeah. The challenge put before both people who who are in the process of overcoming addiction, or have an acute awareness of their mental health needs. The challenge that the last 2 months have put in front of people, you can be as strong or as messy as the moment requires or allows, as long as you stay true to what the baseline has to be. And that's the challenge every day. All this nonsense did was illuminate that fact again. Illuminate something that has always been true. Now you know that You can maintain sobriety when you have all the distractions you could ever need.
Mhm.
And you can also maintain when you have none of the distractions that you need.
Yeah. I mean, I am,
And what a wonderful thing to know about yourself.
yeah, well, absolutely. And also to know about myself that the voices of, well, who gives a shit? Just go get a pack of cigarettes.
Mm.
That makes no sense. It's an inflammatory lung virus. It's why would first thing I do or think to do is to get something that's going to compromise my productivity here.
Hmm.
All logic goes out the window. And I'm just, meditation every night about trying to align how do I treat myself? What is being kind to myself? What does that look like? What does that sound like? Because if I left to my own devices, Jameson's and Guinness and a pack of cigarettes are treats.
Right. It's, I am informed by the variety of perspectives of the storytellers who make up the Bible. I am aware of many, many things getting altered or lost in translation, many things getting edited out. Um, and I I use it to inform my faith, but not to provide the foundation of my faith. The foundation of my faith is my relationship with my Creator, um, and nobody can touch that. And so I look at these schools that try to protect the children with their notion of morality,
Right.
knowing that 50 years ago, their notion of morality would have also included white supremacy. And 80 years ago, their notion of morality would have included some pretty backwards freaking views about the education of young women. And it would have included some backwards views about the education of the Irish or um, American Jews or immigrants. Um, and so I look at people who make that choice, and the only thing I can charitably say is they're not where I hope they get.
Yeah.
Um, but it is not your job to um, subdue a fundamental element of who you are for their comfort. I know I'm smart enough to know all the things I don't know. Um, and that's what life actually teaches you. Don't you miss being as wise and certain as you were in your 20s? Back when you knew everything. And time tempers that, if you're fortunate and you pay attention and you learn all the things you don't know, and it teaches you to be patient with others who aren't aware of all the things they don't know. um and so I try to meet people where they are, but I will not give up ground for them,
Mhm.
because that hurts both of us. And just because they're not where I hope they get, that's the story of my relationship with my parents.
Right.
Um, and when I came out, um, I had to walk a certain length of that road on my own, because they were not ready to join me on that path. And it was only love and patience and refusing to budge an inch that allowed them to join me on that path. And on the other side of it, we have a relationship beyond anything I ever could have imagined for us. But lovingly make it clear you won't budge an inch. And I think when the opportunity presents itself, do take that meeting, you know?
Yeah.
Do sit down and have a respectful conversation. And because the only way their beliefs change is by being challenged.
Yeah, I asked Steve to be in Little Shop as one of the, the prologue. And he was going to do it, but we had a snow day for that. So we talked with him, but still, he's like, I love the LGBTQIA community.
But
yeah. And I'm not as articulate as you are when it comes to being able to stand ground in it. And it's because I'm as unsure about my Christianity as I've ever been, especially in this pandemic.
Mm-hmm.
I was even just driving thinking, God, it's insane to believe in God in a moment like this. I mean, the way that I was devoutly expecting and thinking and praying and all that just goes out the window. And
the promise to us by our Creator, whatever your particular spiritual bent is, nobody has a Creator that promised to make everything okay.
That's true.
But we are meant to be strengthened by our belief and by the community that is created when you find the essential of your belief, which is service. The last thing I got to do in normal times was the final reading for my playwriting class at Aurora, working with their apprentice company. And normally every year, we have the reading for an audience, and it's a big deal for them because for most of them it's their first script, and the final project is writing a 10-minute play, and we bring in professional actors and do it upright. And so we had to cut the audience, and so it was just for the apprentices and Tony and Ann Carroll and a couple of the staff members. And when we went in for the readings, we did not know how much longer the theater was going to be able to stay open. And by the end of the readings, we had found out the theater was closed. That was the last night. And I had the chance, the last time I talked to a room full of people were these kids, who are older than I was when I moved to Atlanta, which is terrifying because they are babies. And I told them then that they were going to be denied access to an audience for a little while. But I was sending them home with a new skill set. All of them now knew how to write for the stage. And so, because they all come in as, I'm a musical theater actor, I'm a straight theater actor, I want to be a director, I want to work tech, whatever it is. Well, you don't get to do any of those things, but you can sit down and write. And so if you need to work some shit out until you have access to an audience again, put it on paper. And I try to take my own advice on that as well. Even if I'm disinclined to sit down and write my next opus right now, when I have a good idea, I take a minute, I write it down, because eventually I'll be inspired to get back to work.
From idea to Steppenwolf. What was the
Mhm.
duration for Angry Fags?
Angry Fags started as a short, the what eventually became the opening scene of the show. Um, and I had written that as a 10-minute piece where it's two friends having a picnic on a hillside. You think they're bird watching or boy watching or something, and then it eventually turns out they're waiting to blow up a building.
Mhm.
Um, and after I wrote that, I was like, well, that's interesting. And then scene two was 3 months earlier. And we lead back up to that point. Um, I wanted to write something about terrorism, and I wanted to write something about platonic relationships between gay men. I did not expect that to happen in the same play. Um, but that sense of being othered, um, it was during the marriage equality fight when I was writing it, and the language that they used about the queer community on all these talking heads on cable news was identical to the language that they use about terrorists. They want to destroy our way of life, and by any means necessary, and protect your children and protect your community and blah 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 blah. And I couldn't help but take that personally. And it led me to wonder what would lead a seemingly um, well intentioned person to be radicalized. And ultimately, the futility of that enterprise. Um, that meeting violence with violence just blows up the world. That's all it does.
Mhm.
It just blows up the world. And once I had a complete script, I took it to Heidi Howard, and that was right when Dell and Faye, the founders of Seven Stages, announced their retirement and that they were handing off the theater to Heidi and Mac. And Heidi decided she wanted Angry Fags to be the first statement the new artistic team made. Um, because Angry Fags deals with a lot of heavy stuff, but it's at its core a dark comedy about a friendship.
Mhm.
Um, and uh, Seven Stages isn't known for its comedies. But they should be because they've done exceptional comedies, but that's not what's expected there. And so I got very excited about being part of someone's first creative statement in as they took on a new terrifying leadership role.
Yeah.
Um, and that production was covered by Out Magazine, and um, and that led to a lot of inquiries and a lot of theaters coming back and saying, um, "We love the piece. We need to talk about the title." Um, and I'm like, "Nope, not changing it. Can't change it. I'm sorry. I need uh if people are made uncomfortable by the title, they are really going to hate the play." And
Good for you. That's
and I only wanted that show
intense.
to be done by theaters that are bold enough to put that title on their marquee. Because if they're not bold enough to put that title on their marquee, then they are not legitimately prepared to have the conversations that that show will provoke. Um, and it certainly provokes responses. I have gotten the best and the worst reviews of my career because of that show. And Pride Films and Plays, in conjunction with Steppenwolf in Chicago, was bold enough to put that name on a marquee. And we just had the Australian premiere at the end of last year.
Mhm.
And or was that this year? Time has no meaning anymore, Dave.
Right.
But they did it in Sydney in conjunction with Mardi Gras, which is their Pride celebration, and um, and it was enormously well received, and also had some rapturously vitriolic reviews. And so it's nice to know that that happens the world over with that show. But it announces itself, it refuses to be ignored, and audiences are encouraged to explore why they feel however they feel about it. Um, because it's pushing buttons either in a good way or a bad way. But all I ask with any of my plays is just pay attention to how you feel about it and why. I'm not asking you to like it. I'm just asking you to pay attention to how you feel.
Did you workshop it a lot between Seven Stages and Steppenwolf, or was it that one?
The the Chicago production was, for the most part, there were definitely edits within, and I was uh uh editing for length more than anything else. The Seven Stages production was presented with two intermissions. And for Chicago, we really wanted to get it down to one intermission, and so we tightened it up a lot in Chicago. But then the massive rewrite happened after the offer for publication from Sam French. I was in the process of doing rewrites to make it just a little more timeless, and I also wanted to explore gender a little bit more within it, because we were leading up to um, my absolute certainty that the play would be published after we had our first female president. And I wanted the play, since it is about female politicians,
Mhm.
um, to acknowledge that and kind of live within that reality. And I was deep into edits on that when November of 2016 happened.
So the show of I saw Entertaining Lesbians at in Marietta.
The workshop production, yeah.
Is it going to, what is the change, or are there changes between now and Dad's Garage?
There are. I've continued the
Are
beta test.
playwrights for when they talk to you, are they encouraged or shocked by how much you workshop your shows, or how much playwrights usually do?
Oh, that's really interesting. Because I've had conversations for years on that very subject. I There is nothing more frustrating to me than reading a newly published play and feeling down to my bones that that playwright needed one more workshop.
Mhm.
And now it's published. And yeah, and I'm like, you weren't done. And I am, and I've only had three of my shows go to publication, not for lack of trying. um but once each one of those shows was slated for publication with perfect arrangement. Yeah, with all three of them, with Perfect Arrangement, Angry Fags, and with Evelyn in Purgatory, I had another round of workshops just doing table work and a music stand read of the piece before I submitted it for publication, just to be sure. And each one of them had substantial changes um, between the offer of publication and what I actually submitted, because I get very frustrated when I see a published version of a play that the playwright has left a little undercooked in the middle.
Mhm.
Um, and I think it's so, and maybe it comes from um, the fact that my entire professional career in theater was based in apprenticeship and mentorship, rather than in a traditional classroom setting.
Mhm.
Um, the mentorship of the audience for me as a playwright, as a director, as a performer, um, is the last word. And um, and so as I'm developing works, putting them in front of an audience and consistently um, taking my lumps from where I got it wrong and celebrating where I got it consistently right.
Mhm.
But that was the reason with entertaining lesbians in particular, we had to do a 3-week workshop of that show because it's a farce.
I'm thinking about Dan. I'm thinking it was correct, right? Dan.
Yeah.
I mean, he's phenomenal in the production that I saw. Lines that he probably had to constantly. What a great collaborator to be able to work with someone and realizing that I'm in service to the show.
Yeah.
I'm not doing this for the reviews. I'm not doing this. I'm doing it for my practice and to be of
Hmm.
service to the show. That's awesome. That's the actor's job.
Yeah. And it's what a gift to that's the other payoff of staying in Atlanta,
Mhm.
is I can make that happen. That I can get 7 people to give me 3 weeks of work for literally no money,
Mhm.
um, just because we all want the play to be as good as it can possibly be.
But you knew that. You had a very that's a very particular vision to know that I'm going to put my flag right here in Atlanta.
It was I didn't have the complete awareness of it until I had moments where I considered pulling up the stakes
I'm moving.
and moving. um and realizing, um no, this is where I draw my creative lifeblood from. I love meeting the other communities. I love finding out how the other communities function. DC is very Atlanta. um yeah, there's a very similar vibe in the DC theater community, to what we've got going on here. I think it's because they kind of exist in that same place as well, of doing exceptional work, but not being considered a theatrical hub and kind of going like, what the hell? um and so I love seeing how other communities function. And then thanks to television, getting to meet some really, really wonderful people on the West Coast, who are in the business of telling stories on screen. And then some other people that I'm like, nope, okay, never need to see you again.
Not to interrupt,
And
but not to interrupt, but how
no,
did that conversation go with Hallmark when you were like, "Yes, I am the playwright of Angry Fags"?
I have now written 6 movies for them. We have never once had a conversation about my playwriting career.
Really
Never.
incredible.
Yeah. I know they're aware of it. I mean, there's a Wikipedia for me that I cannot edit, even though they have my age wrong. But but I
Oh,
can't
they erred on the side of younger, right?
they said I'm a year older. I'm like, stop saying that. But I can't show a published source to prove my own age. It's very frustrating. Um, yeah, all of that information is, obviously available about me. And the producers that I work with on individual films, um, we have a lot of conversations about the theater side of my career. Um, and but with the network itself, no, it's just never come up.
That's amazing.
Yeah, isn't that fascinating?
Well, that's good, and then well, that means that they're probably supportive. I'm sure that they've
Yeah, I mean, I can say one thing that I love about Hallmark. Um, Actors, whether they choose um, to be an open and active face for the queer community, um, or if they're out but not necessarily leading every interview with it, kind of, whatever their individual comfort level is. Hallmark 100% supports every single queer artist that works for them, and there is zero expectation that anyone would be anything less than authentically themselves. And there's some really, really great queer artists who are in the upper echelons of their talent pool. um and Hallmark stands right beside those artists. And I don't, just having lived through the last 25 years as a queer artist, I know 10 years ago that would not have been um, as easily achieved.
Mhm.
But there's a bunch of queer artists there who are authentically themselves and refuse to budge an inch on the issue. And I love that this source of wholesome family entertainment um, genuinely respects all families. And that's why I'm happy to work there. I'm still kind of baffled and amazed by the fact that I work there, but I love that I do.
Well, because if they didn't, you wouldn't work there.
Yeah, exactly. Um, yeah, no. I just would have no interest.
Yeah, I can always, if any of this is too touchy or you don't want me to air anything about Hallmark, I can edit any of that out. I was just
No, it's fine. It's fine. I certainly trust me. I wouldn't go around saying anything that I wouldn't want people to know that I felt. But yeah, I mean, good God, if I had an employer that did not celebrate the person that I am, then there's no way that I could be an effective artist for them.
that was revolutionary when you said that to me. It seems like it would be so instinctive, but when you said, David, wouldn't you want your employer to celebrate your relationship if you were to find the love of your life and to announce that you're going to get married?
Right.
Whereas, like, I'm still processing that. Yeah, but it's they could, the board of directors and the, like, fuck, you're right. That should not be a problem.
Right. Right.
That should not be a problem. That should not be hidden.
Yeah. And the more people who are willing to live authentically and unapologetically, the harder it is for others to create spaces where that's considered unacceptable. Because there's just too damn many of us. We're too visible. And the more we stand firmly in our own shoes, um, the more pushback we're going to get, because the people giving the pushback will become increasingly marginalized, and they were used to calling the shots, so that's going to scare the hell out of them.
Yeah, they're holding up
And
with white knuckles now,
yeah, and
collectively in a
that's exactly where we are right now, and it's the reason that um people in their position are making nothing but decisions based in fear. And it's the reason they vote the way they do. It's the reason they tweet what they tweet. It's the reason that they treat people the way they treat people, because they're terrified, and all they're doing is making decisions based in fear. And that is not sustainable.
no, it's not.
And so i I wish for them to know better and do better. And if not, then yes, they get left behind. These are white men. white, cisgender, heterosexual men, because they have an expectation of a position that they're going to occupy. And when anything challenges that, then they're going to the first thing they can find that gives them power. And that's why you don't see, a rash of, lesbians with guns. Like, and it's like, I'm sorry, marginalized communities already have an expectation that their position is going to be challenged. And so as a result, we don't lose our freaking minds when it happens. Someone's just challenging your position. That's all they're doing. But if you have an expectation and an understanding that the space that you occupy may be challenged on any given day, not threatened, challenged, then you already have a pretty wide range of tactics in your arsenal to deal with that challenge. You may try to diffuse with humor. You may try to, rationalize. You may, run the fuck away. But you've got tactics ready to go because you know that there's a possibility your position is going to be challenged today because you're a member of a marginalized community. When you see yourself as top of the heap, you don't have those resources readily available because you thought you were in charge. And that's when you make really, really stupid decisions.
This is I can't watch all this back.
I'm so sorry. We have gone so over time.
No, it's great. I love it, and that's why I love doing these because it will be it's so selfish. I just soak it up like a sponge. I feel more aligned to my purpose. I feel like I can breathe a little bit deeper after talking to you.
That means a lot. That really, really means a lot because I cherish your friendship very much and I appreciate your point of view.
That's it. That's all I got.
It's good to see you.
It's great to see you.
Enjoy your time down there. How long are you staying?
Oh gosh, well, I don't know. For what, in Young Harris?
No, and I thought you were down with your parents now.
No, in St. Simons, I came back up to the mountains.
Oh, you came back up. I thought you were headed down.
I was going to, but life, family dynamic. But I'll go down there soon.
Good God! Stop recording and tell me what's going on with your parents.
So
1, 2, 3, 4. One-legged Roger and his one-legged mother.
In the sink under the upstairs bathroom sink, and it was taking up space.